I'm once again about to prepare my recording. I believe. Yes, it's on. Welcome, dear listeners. This is once again Archivist Jerome of the Neo Eden Archives, and I'd like to welcome you once again to another audio recording. I'm hopefully going to try and formalise these a bit more. Now, I understand from my last audio that there was an interest from a few people who wanted a more of a compilation of one of the powers. Now, I will get to all of them in time, but the first one that was actually presented to me as one of quite a bit of interest was of the Republic. And I concur. So I did my research and looked into the nature of the Republic of Medarin, or the Republic of Medarin, depending on who you ask. Let's start with that, actually, because that's actually quite an interesting aspect of the Republic. The Republic themselves are a conglomeration of a conglomeration. We're going to go back a little bit in time here, but I'll abbreviate a lot. But before the cleansing was the time of the great economic blocks. The economic blocks were entire continent-spanning nations, essentially. But they were different. Whereas nowadays, most nations that still exist are either settlements or great unified powers, one way or another. However, in this instance, the Republic can trace itself back to two economic blocks. The European economic bloc and the African economic bloc. The former, a pedestal of various democratic groups, sciences, and a lot of culture that makes up much of the Western Hemisphere. As the latter, a rising star at the time, for many centuries had been far behind the rest, but due to the grand supply of rare resources and absolute plethora of mines, they became quite the power, and once unified, they could no longer be bullied by the other nations and instead had to be met at the equal playing field. To my understanding, they even got their hands on a few atomic weapons, which, as you may or may not know, is a very good way of equalising yourself on the playing field. To my understanding, those weapons were used during the cleansing, but the Republic does still maintain a few old-age nukes. As do a few of us, really, if we haven't got anything more devastating to hand. Now, you may say, well, how did we get here then? These massive continent-spanning nations. Well, the Republic's not that big. It's very big. It's a good part of the southern end of Europe and North Africa. And of course, Mediterranean itself, which together is continent-like space. Well, we have to talk a little bit on the events of the cleansing, because the events that led us here made the Republic what they are today. To start with, most of the European bloc was decimated. Absolutely decimated. Anything north of Italy and southern Germany was hit hard, and only the sturdiest of people survived. Some have. I would stress, there are Stimmer clans in former Scandinavian territories who have managed to survive. Maker only knows how. And there are those who retain in the British Isles to this day, the Brittany Outpost, as it's now known, the Britannia Outpost, as they would call it. But apart from those people, most of Europe was annihilated. Bits of Spain and Portugal survived. Southern France, Italy, anything north of Switzerland especially was gone. Germany as well maintained a lot of its southern areas, and there are still some encroachments towards the east, though the further north and east of Europe you go, you run into either other groups who have made their homes there, the occasional crusading force of Unchained, and as you enter Russia, you realise things aren't so good up there. There's two reasons that block fell, and one of them was due to what descended, and what was unleashed. The horrors of hives there. They have quite the liking for many of the old atomic reactors silos, apparently, that particular brood. The Chernobyl hive is well, let's just say the Republic gave it a wide berth, for a reason. Now, to that end, the Republic do also go south into the African bloc. Now, as for that one, it was scorched. Wholesale, worse than before. And what animals and things survived became so hardy and lethal that it was, frankly, dangerous. So, they did what they could, expeditionary companies and the like, and it made them very hardened. Now, the Mediterranean before this had already begun drying, and such, there were parts of it that even allowed walking even before the cleansing. But after? Open space. Even tanks could cross it. And so they did. The water wars that met the end of the cleansing period were brutal. And this was before the likes of angels and dragoons were commonplace. So the Unchained were at their strongest here, able to deploy Hell Titans, these titanic beasts that are the size of skyscrapers, to ravage anything that they came across. Great hordes as well. Not to mention other groups who joined them that would eventually become the Raiders, or just the Horrors. All these together made many a fledgling nation fall before they even got started. Or encouraged nomadic behaviour, which is not uncommon either. The Republic held firm. The European bloc cemented its power in Rome, a symbol. A symbol of imperialism, yes, but a symbol of ancient history. And to that end, they made it a big focal point of power. In addition to Greece to some extent as well in the early days, as they wanted to maintain democracy, and Greece was always seen as the ancient ancestor of democracy, where it all came from, as such. The original council was in Greece, though the capital itself was in Rome. Rome would later go on to become the Republic's primary capital. Though, as I will express in a minute, they have two cities they consider capitals. But the African bloc went north. To my knowledge, South Africa got off a little lighter than the central areas, though, to my understanding, it is a hotly contested area between various expeditionary groups and a vast band of raiders who entered that territory. But as for the north, it solidified, became quite industrial to a point, though not as industrial as the northern end of the Republic. It had a lot of resources, and a lot of people with means and will to do what needed to be done. As such, the two would clash. The African side eventually coalesced in having Marrakesh become the focal city, an ancient city in its own right, and historic, well preserved, with Cairo being kind of a secondary head. The old Northern Union, depicted often by a twin-headed serpent wrapping around the sun, one head representing Marrakesh, one representing Cairo. And that flag has not entirely gone, but we'll get to that in a second. After the two had clashed and were brutally beaten down, they eventually realised things couldn't continue, and it all came into a head when they were invaded by a Hell Titan. But unlike before, they stood their ground, dug in, and fought with everything they had. Every bit of rage turned on the beast, and it came alone, arrogant in belief that it could destroy the lot of them, and if they were divided, it would have. However, enough salvo rounds, rockets, and other machines of war deployed against it were more than enough to make it retreat, and even wound it. I must stress, to wound such a creature is not easy with conventional weaponry, at the time especially. The Maker's gifts were not commonplace, and his clergy had not fully digested the information, as the Maker had left a lot, but not all of it is easily to understood. But not all of it is easy to understand, and to that end, the Republic didn't have a lot to use. it was only a lot later that they benefited from the Maker's Gifts. Now, after this event, the two become one. The last dregs of the European Council and the African Coalition would unite, eventually settling on the name the Republic of Medarin, named after the Mediterranean that united them both. Medarin was a name derived from the south, and was a unofficial name for many who would come together in the southern Mediterranean, in particular in Marrakesh. As such, there are those who would still refer to the Republic as the Republic of Medarin. And to honour this, the province that most those who know the Republic by that name live in is referred to as Medarin Province, in honour of them, and still bears that flag. There are those who, if they've joined the armed forces from such an area, will have both flags. It's a cultural thing. The Republic, you'll have to understand, the Republic is a rich cultural place, whereas Neo Eden has done away with a lot of the old in favour of New Age everything, and the Empire is very picky on what it allows, seeking to dominate other cultures. The Republic is obsessed with preserving and unifying culture, and it will pay through the nose for cultural artifacts from across the globe. And, as such, many traders will risk their lives to find those artifacts. Either flags of nations long forgotten, texts, languages. One of the greatest finds was the recovery of the Rosetta Stone, now housed in Cairo, the Great Museum. The pyramids being restored was a very big event. A unified work between Neo Eden and the Republic as a sign of our goodwill. The pyramids were collapsing. As such, we utilised our resources and knowledge to rebuild them, reinforce them, and we even made a new one to act as a central hub of society. A small city within a building, in essence. It was most of the Republic's work. We simply helped supply material and manpower, as at the time, the Republic needed their manpower elsewhere. The Republic is not blessed with great walls and wall guns like us, or impassable mountain terrain like the Empire. We will get to their relationship with the Empire as well, as you will come to see in time, the two have not seen eye to eye, and furthermore, have clashed often, at least 3 times, with the last war only ending about a year ago, if that. So tensions are still very high. The Republic was very keen on preservation, but also on the understanding it needed to unify culturally, as well as physically. One of the most controversial and yet successful attempts at integration was the divide of thirds. 1/3 of the European populace, 1/3 of the African populace would trade. As in, 1/3 would go one way, one would go the other, and live amongst those people. Help bring them all together. It's still ongoing, and it's not perfect. Tensions are still there a little, but people willingly wanting to live amongst each other certainly helps things. And there are settlements being plopped all over the Mediterranean itself now, in an effort to solidify that central bit of power. A big thing to note as well is they have done their best to try and balance out where important aspects of society are. As such, Marrakesh and Rome retain the status of capital, and the government will move between both between 6 months of the year, spending one set of 6 months in Rome and the latter in Marrakesh. Typically the start of the year in Rome, the end of the year in Marrakesh. It is an odd choice, but it certainly helps unify people, knowing that the representatives of them move around the nation and are far more closer sometimes than you might expect. Another big aspect is, whereas the large civilian universities have been rebuilt in Cairo, the lands formerly known as Germany, which would take on quite a big part of the culture, as you will notice should you ever visit the Republic, the Germanic language is still prominent. Blended a little, yes, with some African dialects, but especially towards a good majority of the Republic, a variant of German has survived and become quite prominent. In addition to this, Germany has also, for what's left of it, a good amount, surprisingly, left of it, has become a engineering hub, an industrial hub. Many of the southern resources are moved up, and it is in these lands where many of the Republic's tanks and war machines are produced. Vehicles such as the Jaguar, named after an ancient breed of cat, and, to my understanding, a brand of car. This tank isn't remarkable, but it's versatile, and that, I think, is really evident for the entire Republic. They are unremarkable, but versatile, and if anything, they become remarkable as such. Everyone likes an underdog story. The Republic really are that underdog, and the more I've come to learn about them, the more I've realised that is their role. They are outgunned, outnumbered, but they are damn well good at fighting with what they've got. And you'll see later, they've caught up in some regards. Now, the Jaguar itself is a fairly standard mainline battle tank, with some additions. It uses treads, classic mode of transport, it works. Sloped armour, reactive armour, whole 9 yards. But it does have a few more modern tools. Projector shields able to react to incoming fire, to allow it to effectively prevent damage, generally speaking. In addition, it can also link up with various drones the Republic use. These drones are AI-powered, and we will discuss a little bit of the Republic's AI usage, as they are one of the only groups to really make use of true AI. To my understanding, though, this is only in utilitarian means, such as controlling of military vehicles, or controlling of mining equipment in dangerous regions. When it comes to culture, they are serious on that. They do not believe a machine can produce culture. As such, it doesn't. Now, another big thing is the surprisingly high caliber of this Jaguar. It utilises a 200mm cannon, versatile enough to take all kinds of shot, from missiles to programmable ammunition, cluster, and more. Even prototype plasma shells that they've been devising, which is surprising. We didn't know they could use those until recently. Though, from what I understand, it ruins the gun, so they don't like it at the minute. You'll notice there's a begrudgingness to certain weapons they utilise, and it gets more extreme later. I won't go over all their military armaments, but we'll talk about a few, as their tanks are certainly impressive at times, and they have a few other interesting tools. The next main tank you'll probably see is the Lion. A design from the south, this large, heavy tank, with a dual set of treads on each side, is a bit of a behemoth. It comes with two 200mm cannons, over-under, so one below the other, essentially. The understanding was they realise force fields are strong, but if you hit them fast and hard, it may well crack them. As such, one is typically armed with more concussive, high-explosive ammunition, with the intention of forcing a overload of a force field. The second, a more armor-piercing round intended to punch through the armor of whatever it's hitting, with some explosive at the back, potentially, as well. Point is, it wants to pop your shields, then pop your hull. Simple enough. The Lion is equipped with 4 shield projectors, 2 that are passive, 2 that are reactive. It can, in addition, have missile pods and laser projectors, which is not common in the Republic. They have not got many lasers at all. In fact, most of their lasers, as I understand, are looted from the Empire, or us, or anyone else they've managed to steal it from. They don't really produce many at all. As such, they're very rarely relied upon. The Lion also tends to come with drones. The Pride drones, or the Lioness, as they're often called as well, are small tanklets that essentially act as supporting vehicles. Either they're a small tank-like vehicle that is purely there for tank hunting, or they've perhaps got anti-infantry weaponry, grenade launchers, anti-aircraft missiles, anti-hacking, etc. Now, that's one aspect of their military. And you'll notice the feline naming convention of their tanks. That is a holdover from the Germanic origins, as all the tanks are produced there. We'll move on now to the boots on the ground, the people. These men and women will be charged with giving 2 years of their life to the Republic, and at any point could be pulled up for service. This is very important, as whereas the Empire demands service when they call upon you, and even will ask you to, but it doesn't force, it's just get further in life if you do. The Republic require this because, simply put, the people are their defense. Their troopers are armed fairly traditionally. Kevlar, bit of plates if needed, not much else. But normally that's enough to scare off many groups anyway. Standard ballistic weaponry, with a few extras. They're full-time veterans, those who have chosen to stay on the military, are given further training and access to exoskeletons that they can wear to allow them to better wield heavier weaponry. This can include laser projectors, railguns, as yes, the Republic do have a few, even their tanks can occasionally come with them. Rarely, though. They don't have that many, and they're not as quick as the coil guns that we use, for example, but they're effective. A little outdated? Maybe, but a railgun still works. Just to be very frank with you, it works. And has certainly sent a few demons straight back to the hell they crawled out of. Now, one of the big moments for the Republic was the introduction of Sandworks. Sandworks is a company that fled the Americas during the cleansing. To my understanding, they may have come from a different group entirely. We don't know. But they're now branded as Sandworks. This company exclusively works with the Republic and produce the most wildest inventions, typically for war, but occasionally some of their wartime products become civilian. A good example of this would be utilization of energy weapons to transmit energy. As such, the Republic's power lines utilize lasers rather than wiring. This is admittedly something that we have looked at ourselves, though we have some other answers. The Empire has jealously sought this technology as they still rely on cabling, which can be exploited, especially in the conditions they're in. To say it's impressive is an understatement. But it's not the only thing. For when they came with a gift of the Maker, human-machine interface. A verse that we use to a point, but not often. It didn't really feel necessary for what we use, but the Republic, this was revolutionary. And they, after witnessing our paladins, and I believe this was after an engagement with them, when they attempted to storm the Britannia outpost, which, if you've ever encountered a Neo-Eden paladin, I assure you, they do not mess around, and their railcam weaponry does not discriminate. It obliterates. But seeing this, they realised their standard troops would suffer in engagements with such foes, and this was not long before encountering the first Dragoons. That was a bloody lesson. When a cyborg centaur runs up to you and tears you in half from your arm to your leg, you know you're outclassed. Speed and, frankly, the firepower. They were bringing some big guns then, and that was before particle weapon was commonplace for them. So, during the First War, Sandworks produced the first suits. These war suits, as they would later go on to be called, were power armor that bulked you up a little bit. Typically, you wouldn't be using your own feet on the ground. There would be an extension for more crooked leg that would allow for more rapid movement. More bestial looking, frankly. But what it also meant was you could fit flight packs to these suits. And these flight packs would allow an impressive degree of flight. Over the years, they've improved them. Typically, they have 3 models that they use a lot. The Goliath, a heavy, brawling one that can't really fly, but is clad in heavy firepower. Missiles, Gatling cannons, the whole 9 yard. Impressive walking tanks. And certainly a benefit in urban warfare, and frankly, able to, well, take on a Dragoon head-on. Considering how strong a Dragoon is, that is impressive for a human that's only gotten the most basis augments to have ports put on their body to connect the suit. Their nervous systems are in sync. To things like the Wraith, a unique one. The Republic didn't have many units that dealt in technophurgy. The mystical art of hacking, but also dipping a little bit into more paracausal technologies. Only a little, though. We will have a different discussion on technophurgy, but in short, it's a very advanced one of hacking. And the Wraith suit could do that. It could also mask itself quite well, utilising it. And then there was the Ace suit. The Ace suit is their premier flying suit. This would assist their air power in taking on more rapid elements, and would later receive extensive upgrades to allow them to attempt to go toe-to-toe with the Enlightened of the Empire. Though, when I do the episode on the Empire, you'll understand why that is a really dangerous idea. But I digress. The point is, these suits made a very big difference, and after the First War, where our accidental entrance to it, in dealing with a demonic incursion, we ended up humbling the remnants of the Empire force at the time. We helped them deal with the demons, but whilst we were there, they seemingly encountered something that we were looking for. Now, all I have on record here is something referred to as a shard. I'm not at liberty or have the knowledge of what that means, but this shard apparently contained information. We eventually recovered it and quietly took it back, but before we did, they learned a lot from it. And it filled their knowledge of human-machine interface to a new level. But also other ideas. You see, Sandworks began a new project as the Second War was rolling in, and it was not looking good. We were not getting involved. We said as much. We've dealt with the Empire ourselves. We've clashed. It happens. But we were, and we still are, pretty non-involved. So, they needed a plan. The suits were a good start, but they needed something extra, something that could really push things, especially as the Enlightened took the field, and the modern Dragoons took the field. The old ones already were strong, but the modern ones, a league above. And a league above any human, that's for certain. So, the Herospecs project began. We only have one visual of this project, and it's the most public representative of this project. The Mamba Assault Mech. Yes, they have transitioned from suits to full-on mechs, like you would have seen in some fiction. But they've managed to make it work. Though we've uncovered some dark secrets, and this is perhaps one end of the Republic that is on the darker side, as those who have fallen in battle but proven themselves will be given a choice to submit themselves to the Herospecs procedure. Now, the Mamba is a very public example, but to my understanding, their pilots are basically the living dead, too broken to ever fight again. They are permanently interred into the mech forever. Now, you might wonder, how did they get this thing working? There are intrinsic problems with mech suits, which is why we don't use them, why the Empire doesn't use them. Well, they found a way around it. Turns out it wasn't technology they needed, it was biology. They found a way to fill its internals with the horrors, sneaking on to the Russian bloc and taking samples of horror they were able to convert the flesh metal into a substance that could then line the inside of the mech suits, filling in the areas they didn't understand, or understand how to make work. This would have many side effects, but one in particular was it would allow perfect flesh metal integration. Perfect for a permanent pilot. And perfect to allow any weapon to be integrated into this mech suit. All it needed to do is make sure that the internals of the weapon touched the biological flesh metal. The two blending would allow the mech to utilize the weapon perfectly. As such, Mamba is able to utilize various weapons taken in various conflicts. This includes particle weapons, coil guns, lasers, and quite often as well, they'll have internal laser projectors, a set of eye-like structures which both feed information and can project beams of energy. Now, these suits also have a paracausal property, potentially as the Shard allegedly taught them how to engrave we're not entirely sure what, but something unnatural into the lining of the metal so that the biology wouldn't overtake it. The prototype, which still exists, known as the Herodin, was the first to utilize this. Now, it mutated and forced them to make it a quadruped rather than a biped. It is known for having one arm dedicated to two railguns, which often mid-battle convert into coil guns for more rapid fire. And costs some range due to how it forces the weapon to change. It has shoulder-mounted particle weapons, laser projectors, missiles, a stolen prototype of ours that has a arm-mounted plasma blade, which it can turn into like a whip-type device mid-battle, and a shield mounted, which utilizes various shield generators inside of it. The Herodin was first deployed at the end of the Second War. This was to the horror of the Dragoons in question, as at this time they had managed to defeat the enlightened general who was leading this army. If he was there, he might have been able to help stop this thing. But due to its paracausal nature, lasers weren't cutting through it. We'll get into another audio on paracausal and what that means, but just know that many of its passive effects make various weapons not work as intended. So, when it fought the remaining Dragoons, who were not destroyed or injured like their liege, it tore them to shreds, violently. So viciously, in fact, that they had to flee. They were ordered to by their lord, who would not see any more of them torn apart like that. There are reports that the machine ripped open a great maw and began devouring them. We don't know this for certain, but we are aware of reports that these mechanized units have an aura of fear to them, so palpable that even recordings show nightmarish visions upon seeing them. We believe this may be part of their paracausal nature, potentially. Now, there is one final unit from the Herospex project. The Herospex itself, the final mechanized unit, which we have very little on currently, is the ultimate expression of terror. It is the perfected mutagenic genes mixed with the technology. Whereas the Mamba is the technology mastered, and the Herodin was an attempt to do both and struggling, this thing perfected it. Used as a shock, assault, and terror unit, the Republic dislike the utilization of any of these mechs, frankly, but this one in particular. But it is the most effective. Supposedly, elements of these harried the Imperial forces all the way back to their borders before they'd reached Turkey. Nowadays, they're in Turkey, but back then they weren't, and they stayed away for a while. The demons of the mountains, they often called them. These machines of great scything talons, various laser weapons, and scything claws that would launch out with energized blades to bisect anything that got too close to them. They were also able to do limited flight, supposedly. There are mixed reports. Supposedly, the pilots also had them decorated with trophies of fallen enemies, and even skulls painted onto the armor and great cloaks to cover them. to add to their mystique. We don't know how much of this is true, but the point is, they are a horrific weapon, and to my understanding, very effective. The Mamba has been used a lot to great effect in public, and has seen a lot of support, though not many know what they really are underneath. Who knows how insane the pilots are these days? Perhaps they are too patriotic to fail, perhaps they were already madmen and women before they ever got interred. But they are the living dead, and sadly not the only example of raising the dead. We'll get into that another time, though. To wrap up the Republic, what you need to know is this. The Republic are a unified front that aim for diplomacy, and if that fails, they will stand their ground. They will not yield to you. They will be reasonable, but if you try to bend them, they will break you. Be you Stimmer, be you Raider, be you Angel, be you Dragoon, they will stand their ground. And though we do have a diplomatic tie with them, there are still tensions, especially as we've encroached into various European zones for our own reasons, which they didn't like, and our unwillingness to involve ourselves with their wars with the Empire. They're also fiercely against any attempts for Stimmer or Raider to enter their cities. They'll trade with them, which, when it comes to the Raiders in particular, we don't like much ourselves, but they will do it. However, certain Raider groups are kill on sight for the Republic, which is not common for the Republic to be like that, but they loathe certain groups and will hunt them down. Same with Stimmers. Quite often the Republic is seen as a soft target, and to an extent they are, but if you overplay your hand, the Republic's soft, squishy nature can be enclosed in a glove of steel and blade, and you will certainly regret mistaking kindness for weakness. But know this, dear listener, the Republic would welcome you happily, but do not take advantage of them, for they can truly unleash a different side of themselves that will remind you that they survived the cleansing without any help at all. That'll be all for today, though. Please let me know if you wish to know anything more about the Republic, and I will endeavour to answer them either in response to this audio or in a whole other audio if necessary. I'm going to look into dabbling into the other great powers. Perhaps I'll even wax lyrically over the glory of New Eden soon in time as well. But this will be your archivist signing off for now. This was another audio of the Neo Eden Archives. I do hope you enjoyed today's audio, and I hope that was a fun little look into the Republic. Not the one I expected to get any attention initially, and I admit I had to really sit there and rack my brain as to how I wanted to portray them. And there's definitely more to them I want to talk about, but I felt this should summarise them and give you a good flavouring for both their civilian side and their military. Let me know how you feel about these kind of vlogs as well. This is the first of many, so give me some thoughts. Do you like them? Do you want more specifics? Should I focus just on the military? Just on the civilian? Let me know what you want, and I'll endeavour to adapt and adjust the rest of them. I do hope you don't mind the 2-weekly upload schedule. It's made these a lot more doable, and I hope that the quality I can produce with these now is showing. I am still trying to get my artistic elements a bit better. Not entirely satisfied with some of the ones I've done recently, but I'm still quite new at art, so I do apologise. I hope, though, that you enjoyed the depiction of the Mamba. First time doing a mech, so hey, can only go up from there, right? But that's enough from me. Thank you very much for listening today. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, please leave a like, a comment, maybe even subscribe, so you know exactly when I'm going to be doing things. Below in the comments, or in the description, excuse me, you should find a variety of links linking to my other channels, and should be to my Discord as well, which will have a link to any of these videos, and any updates will be there first, though do keep an eye on the usual announcements on YouTube, and my social medias as well, where I do more VTubery sort of stuff on my other channels. If you like the idea of that, please come join me. It's where the lore originally started and then grew into something far more. But if you're just here for lore, then please like, subscribe, and stick around. There's more to come. But until next time, thank you very much again. I'll see you all very soon.